Welcome everyone to another episode of DigiTalk Architects. We have with us today Lawson Abinanti from Message That Matter. Lawson, please go ahead and tell us about yourself, your experience, your company, your expertise.
Boy, could take a little while. I'll try to be short and sweet. I'm a journalist by trade, and I wrote about golf, which is my passion. I played a lot of competitive golf over the years, and
Nice.
I got fed up with journalism and quit, and
Oh
immediately
no.
got hired by this golf organization in the Seattle area, the
Okay.
pros, and I put on pro-ams, and I met the president of a software company. He was a CPA who developed accounting software for his large CPA clients. And I got to know him. I got fed up with my golf organization and quit. And he called me a day or two later and asked me if I could set up a golf game at one of the most exclusive clubs in Seattle. And I was able to do it because I knew the golf pro, which was a miracle. So anyhow, he was hosting the Treasurer Stewart Title, which is the largest title insurance company in the U.S. still. Now we're going back to the early 90s. So anyhow, I was playing golf with these guys, and on the back nine, John Callahan, the president of the company, the founder, said, "What are you doing right now?" Well, he knew I was a writer, and he thought I could sell. And I said, "Well, you ought to hire me." And he goes, "Well, we can." So that's how I got into the software business, and I worked
All right.
for Timeline for about eight years or so. And then I got involved with TM1 Software, which is owned by IBM now. I was on the management team of that for a number of years. And then we got acquired, after 2 years, I turned down the offer to keep going. And I started consulting, working with companies, but I knew this consultant who specialized in positioning and messaging. So I engaged, his name is Barry Briggs, and I engaged him several times, including when I became director of product marketing for Navision in Denmark. Now, Navision is now Microsoft 365. It was an accounting ERP system. So Division merged with another Danish company, Damgard. So I got merged out of a
Good job.
position. Yeah.
Again.
And I decided with Barry Briggs to found Messages That Matter, and that was in 2001. Now, the framework that I use, Barry retired. Barry developed the framework at Microsoft in the late 80s. And that was at the time of Reese and Trout's Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind. And they talked about how important positioning was, but they never explained how to do it. And Barry went around the country following them to try to figure out how they do it. Well, he realized they didn't have a way of doing it, and he created his own. The positioning framework that I use now led the positioning and launch of Windows 3.0, C++, SQL Server, Windows, Word for Windows. So we evolved that framework while I was at Navision. And then Barry retired. So over time, I've written a book about the framework, the positioning framework. I have an online course, and, I've continued to do that. I work with my area of expertise is business to business software and technology. So I've worked in either worked or consulted in a lot of different markets, including business intelligence, customer resource management, CRM,
Very good.
you name it. I've been involved with it. Data security.
All technology.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
of. So let me ask you, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead.
So let me ask you a question. You've had a long and impactful career in the B2B software marketing per se, right?
Yeah.
What inspired you to create Messages That Matter, and what gaps were you trying to solve when you first started the company?
Well, at that time, very few people were doing positioning.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at those that are considered experts in the field now, they weren't, they weren't even, involved in, they started much later. So there was a void, but it really was just, I really liked it. Number one, I really found it to be challenging and interesting.
Hmm.
And, I needed a job, after I got merged out of the job at Navision, but it was just kind of a logical step, just, and I had some good contacts with companies that I eventually ended up, I worked with a company called FRX Software, which again got acquired by Microsoft, but I worked with them for 5 years, helping them
Right.
position every product they had. They were the dominant mid-market financial reporting and budgeting application. And of course,
Okay.
Microsoft eventually killed it.
Got it out.
Well, they were
And
going to,
so when you started Messages That Matter, what was the main idea behind it, right? What trigger um the whole idea behind the company and positioning, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I was, I had been using the framework that Barry developed, or I
Hmm.
was working with him a lot on it. And I just felt like it was a really, as good as it comes approach to positioning and, eliminating some of the problems out there and the way people talk about their product.
What are some of
You
those
know,
problems?
lack of differentiation, number one. I mean, by far, it's not even a close. But another big problem is rather positioning is the mental space in your target audience's mind that you can own with an idea that has compelling meaning. And it's in
Right.
this mental space where your solution to their problem meet and form a relationship. Well, when you describe what your product does, that's not positioning. That's, there's no benefit. So it's not likely that it's going to resonate with the target audience. So anyhow, the whole framework I just felt was something that was really needed. Turns out that they do need it. I evaluate a number of B2B markets and
Hmm.
I'm just doing the business intelligence market right now, and 9 out of 20 vendors claim insights, and
Right.
insights are everywhere. It is the best word ruined by overuse that I can ever remember.
Right.
Although,
So on that note, how can these brands in what it's now a very saturated space break away from the noise and create a message that truly matters to their audience?
well, number one is you need to do your research and figure out, one is who's the target buyer. Two
Right.
is what are their key problems? What's keeping them awake at night? And once you know those, and then you need to know how your competitors are positioned. So when you start brainstorming positioning statements, you can double check to make sure that it's unique. And if it's not, then you need to go to the next problem. The buyer, you rank their problems by importance and probably 3 or 4 or 5 problems. And so if your first effort at a positioning statement creates something that's not unique, doesn't differentiate, then try a positioning statement that addresses number 2 position. And then if that doesn't differentiate, then go to number 3. So, you just need to know how your competitors are positioned. And I don't know what's going on with some of these companies, but for example, in the business intelligence assessment I did, 9 vendors claiming insights.
Hmm.
Last year, 2 of them from last year changed to different positions, but 2 more claimed insights. So they're not even paying attention to what the target, their competitors are positioned. Because how would you come up with insights as a position? Various ways of saying it when you got 8 other companies, competitors making the same claim. And guess what
Right.
happens when these companies compete against each other? You get
What happens?
buyer
True.
confusion, long sales cycles, and price wars, or the dreaded no decision.
That's
So,
worse. Well, one,
you know,
it's, you're racing to the bottom of the pile. And the second one is like, you're not getting anywhere. So, yeah.
yeah, it's, these are not, small unknown companies. These are well known companies like SAP and Microsoft. And, it's like, what are you thinking?
Right. So, On that note, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions these businesses, B2B SaaS tech firms, have about their positioning, well, the positioning of their products or services?
I think the main one is that if you look at these insight claims, somehow they believe that if you write it differently or take a different approach, that that's unique. Well, guess what? It's not. You know, the insights is where
They're the same.
you know, they'll focus. You know, I don't know if it's a misconception, but it just doesn't seem like a lot of them have a process. And,
Okay.
you know, because if they had a process, they wouldn't come up with some of these, you know, lack of differentiated positions. But I think they don't even know what positioning is because so many companies talk about their product, you know, and the wonders of their product. They say things that describe their product, but there's no benefit. So I
Right.
just wonder whether in general, you know, whether companies really know how to do positioning. And if you look at the colleges and what they teach in college, they don't teach positioning. They teach
No,
all
I think
kinds
you're
of,
right. They don't.
yeah, you know, they teach all kinds of things that, you know, each professor has an area of expertise that they're, you know, really into. But I've yet to see any courses on positioning, which is stunning.
Yeah. So you talked about process, right? And I think process is basically the foundation of building this framework, right? Because the
Right.
framework is supposed to give people sort of like the basis of how to build their positioning, right? So
Right.
why don't we talk about or you walk us through the core components of your positioning framework? How does it help companies build alignment across teams and scale marketing efforts with consistency, right? Because that's the other sort of side topic to positioning, right? Like if the teams within a company are not aligned and they're all talking differently and the positioning from one team to the other is different, then there is no alignment and therefore, you know, the position is completely wrong one way or the other.
Boy, you're asking. I'll give you a long answer.
Give me a long answer. We have time. I think it's important, right? Like I think this is where most things break down, right? If you don't align them, if there is no framework, if you're not building the base for it, then how can your teams speak the same language, right?
Right. Right. Well, the first step is to do the research.
Okay.
You know, what are your customer problems? Well, one is who's the buyer? Who are we going to shoot the gun at? Because you got to pick a buyer. You know, it could be the CFO, it could be, you know, or a CEO even. It depends on ultimately who signs the check. Because that's who you really
Who's buying
need
the
to
product, the
convince.
service?
Yeah. So you do your customer problems, you figure out how your competitors are positioned, and I create a competitive map that makes it easy to see how they're positioned relative to each other.
Okay.
And then you know, once you've done that research, now one of the important now as far as alignment goes, there's a couple of key pieces. You know, when you start your research, the first people you go to are the sales professionals, and you
Okay.
ask them, you know, who's the target buyer? What are their problems? Why do we win and lose? There's a whole bunch of important information that you can gather from your sales team. And it's really critical because you want their buy-in to what you end up with. So I say involve sales early and often throughout the positioning process. Now,
Okay.
typically you would have a team of, depending upon the size, 2 to 5 or 6 people, key stakeholders that are on the positioning team. And as they evolve their positioning, they reach out to key stakeholders and get their impressions. And, you know, ultimately the goal is to build consensus for what for your positioning effort. So once you've done that and you've got buy-in from all the key stakeholders and especially sales, when I was at Navision, I realized I played golf with the founders of the company and I realized that they weren't saying the same things that sales and marketing was saying, or marketing and sales was saying. So I required the product managers, at that time they didn't have product marketing, to one, get my buy-in to their messaging, positioning and messaging. And then they were required to go in front of management and get their approval. And we went in front of management about 10 to 12 times, and we only got one rejection. But once you've done all that, you've got everyone aware of what the messaging, positioning, messaging is, and they've had their say, and so they're going to use it, particularly sales. I mean, that's the big alignment problem is, sales thinks marketing, the crap the leads they throw over the fence suck. And marketing thinks sales doesn't follow up on their wonderful leads. And, it's
I've had that happen.
And I don't think there's any other way of creating. I mean, they talk about all these ways of aligning, but if everyone is involved in the core messaging, I can't think of a more important way of developing alignment.
Right.
So, and then when you start brainstorming the positioning statement, which is a short declarative sentence that expresses a benefit that solves a pressing target audience problem, there's 4 questions you start out with. Who's the target buyer?
Right.
What's their problems? How do they solve that problem today? And why is yours a better solution to the problem? Okay, so you've got the answers. You start gathering that in what I call a rationale document. And that's the evidence that helped you converge on the positioning that you are recommending. And that rationale document is part of what you provide to people when they want to analyze it and provide feedback. Once you've got that information gathered, now you've done all your research, then it's, what is your product, the product category? What does it do? A description. So you need, you sometimes just need a description of your product. And then what does it deliver, which is potentially your positioning statement. So there's 7 questions you answer. Now, let's say you converge on a positioning statement that's important to the target buyer. It addresses their number one problem. It's unique. No one else is making the claim. It's believable, and you can use it in all marketing communications because consistency and repetition are critical to claiming a position in the market. So once you've gone through that process, you have a positioning statement. Now you need to create support points, which unfold the story in more detail. The reaction you want to your positioning statement is, that's interesting. Tell me more. How do you do it? And then support points unfold, substantiate, prove the claim you made in your positioning statement. And so ultimately, you end up with 3 or 4 support points that are explaining the story in more detail and a lot of detail underneath them. Literally, I have clients where their messaging, their message strategy, which is the positioning statement and the support points, drills down to how we do it, a demo. So there's an awful lot of detail underneath each support point. Okay. But basically what you're trying to do is to eliminate the potential for someone winging it because you haven't included it in your message strategy. So when it's all done, writers, anyone that needs to write things can go to the message strategy and pull pieces out, particularly the support point, because you want your positioning statement, because literally your positioning statement should be the theme for almost everything you do in marketing. Because again, consistency and repetition are the keys to claiming a position and giving it staying power in the market.
Quick question right there in the positioning statement. What is your recommendation on, like, how long should this statement be? Is it a long explanation?
No. 15 words or less, not including the company, the product name.
Okay. 15 words?
Yeah.
That's it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so that's a challenge on itself, right? Because that's very short.
Well, the thing is that if you go on and on, people, they don't follow it.
Yeah.
Turns out that one of the best books, the best book I've ever read, a marketing book, is Neuromarketing. Okay. And as it turns out, the decision-making part of the brain is primitive and barely understands words. And so you need to use simple language. It can't follow really long sentences, so it needs to be short, sweet, and to the point, and then it'll resonate. But I've seen people, make 3 claims and, a bunch of other stuff, and it's probably 40 words. And there's no way anyone's going to remember that or even, read the whole thing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So short, sweet, and simple is the key. And it
Short.
solves a
Okay, that
problem.
ties up nicely with my next question, because my next question is about, so we're talking positioning, messaging. So how do we put that into our online presence, right? So we're talking websites, right? Because I think you and I were talking about this when we first met. So you said many websites feature good positioning once, and then they never do it again, or or it gets lost in the noise. Why is repetition and consistency messaging across sites and funnels so critical in your opinion? And how do we achieve that?
Well, the decision-making part of the brain is very simple, barely understands anything, but it does note repetition, earmarks it as important, and remembers it.
Okay.
So repetition of keywords, sparks the brain to go, oh, that must be important. I should remember it. And, for example, who's the most successful CRM company in the world? Salesforce.
Yeah.
And Salesforce, for more than 10 years, positioned around the notion of success. And they just pounded home success. It's really impressive. They had Success Force, which was their annual meeting. And, success was everywhere. I have a couple of slides I use in my presentation that shows that. But anyhow, consistency, it's important that you maintain the same tone and everything. And then it's critical that you repeat a couple of the key words. Like I have Eckerson Group is a boutique business intelligence consulting firm. And the position we worked on 4, 5, 6 years ago is get more value from your data. And, it's easy to repeat that enough so people will remember it. And he stuck with it for 5 or 6 years. But, people think you should be changing your position all the time. Well, guess what? But, if you do that, you lose. If you have a position and then you change it, you got to start all over. And unless customer problems change, which they almost never do, there's no reason to change your position unless it's not unique or some others start using the same, they copy you. And that happens a lot. The thing is that if the company that already is using and owns the position is copied by someone else,
it means it's successful.
Well,
they wouldn't be copying it if it wasn't good, right?
And what's ironic is that your market, your target audience is, because you own that position and a competitor starts using it, they'll just think it's the other, the company that owns the position. So, copying doesn't work. But, sometimes maybe it is time to change because too many companies are claiming a certain position that you've owned for a while. So it just depends. You got to factor in a number of data points.
Right. So let me ask you, you've talked about working with large companies, but you also have experience working with founder-led startups. How does your messaging process adapt when you're working with smaller teams that need speed but don't want to compromise on the clarity of that messaging?
Well, we go through the same framework.
Okay.
In that situation, like right now, I'm working with 2 companies that are in startup mode. I basically work with the founder, usually come up with messaging based on his knowledge of the market and the target audience and all those things. And of course, I look at the competitive landscape, but it's really more one-on-one versus when I'm working with a larger group, I would go through my framework. I've got a workshop I do, to introduce people to the framework. And I usually go through some of that with, founders. Well, I definitely go through some of it. It's probably not as extensive, but, the approach is very much the same. It's just that maybe we need to streamline things a bit and maybe not do as much research, except for the one area that I can easily do the research is the competitive landscape, because, positioning is done in public. So I mean, all
It's
you
true.
have to do is go
Is look at
to
it.
a competitor's website and see what they're saying, whether they have a
I agree.
position, and a lot of times they don't. But, I mean, that's a
It's funny
critical
you say that.
piece no matter what.
It's funny you
Yeah.
say that because that is something that I always talk about with my clients and also with my team. There's nothing wrong about going and spying on the competitor. So looking at their website, what they're doing for their own campaigns, so we deal a lot with SEO, optimizing content, creating targeted campaigns, whether it's email or paid ads. And for us, the first step is the competitor research is so important, right? Because it gives us clarity, not just understanding the competitor, of course, but also finding out what they're doing that's working for them that could work for your clients or your company, right? So for me, for my clients, for my company, for my clients' companies. But it gives you insights, funny enough, on what they're using or what they're saying or how they're positioning their own brands, and then allows us to take advantage of that information to either help our clients position themselves better than, right, or how do we add that positioning so that we are on top, right, and people are finding us easier, or it also gives us clarity on what makes us different from the competitor. And then we also go, and obviously in our process, we have to do a lot of keyword research for all the positioning, and that plays hugely into the messaging, right? So our first step, it's always look at the competitor, and that's a huge part of our process when we're looking at content for websites, content for campaigns, their whole digital presence, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, some companies, maybe quite a few, the bigger they are, they definitely have a competitive intelligence group, and they should be gathering that kind of information that you've just, pointed
Funny
out.
enough, most
And
don't.
no, and they're not
No,
doing anything as far as they're, looking at. I mean, you need to monitor your competitors' positioning on a regular basis, because if it changes, there's something going on. There could be a change of management. There could be a
true.
change of the CMO. There could be a strategy change. There could be a lot of different things that a change of position indicates. So in fact, I offer a alerting and monitoring service that does monitor the competitors, websites and whatever, to see whether, identify when there is a change, to then start doing some more research, because it tells you, hey, something's going on. And maybe they just changed their position, but it could be a lot of other factors that could be fairly significant. But
Right.
the more research you do about the competitors,
Mm-hmm.
including marketing communications, the better chance you are of understanding all aspects of what your competitors are doing, and what's working, what's not working, all those things you can monitor. And you should, but
Yeah, I
they're
agree.
not.
Well, yeah. Okay, let's switch it up a little bit because I want to cover one thing that's in everybody's minds nowadays. And, the big talk is AI. Man, we talk about AI on pretty much every podcast I've recorded this far. But on this particular topic, with AI changing how we market and create content, where do you see messaging and positioning evolving? Or do you think that they fundamentally stay the same?
The only reason that your positioning and messaging should change is if the problems change.
Hmm.
And guess what? TM1 was a natural extension of Excel, and it was used for budgeting, financial planning, and it now drives IBM's planning and analytics product.
Okay.
So I was around spreadsheets a lot. And when I left, the company that acquired TM1 software was Applex. And when I left there, and this was in the mid 90s, it was like, no way is Excel going to survive. it's going to be gone. And guess what? What's
Still
the
here.
number one problem? What is the number one problem in the budgeting financial reporting market today? It's Excel hell.
It is true.
It's the problems associated with using Excel. The point is, the problems don't change, and for some reason, consultants and various companies, they're changing all the time. And if your position is unique and important to the buyer, then there is absolutely no reason to change your position unless, again, the problems change. I think, if you look at companies, the founder created the product because they were solving a problem and it wasn't being solved. If you ask any founder, why'd you build your business? Why'd you start? Well, there was a problem that wasn't being solved. And that problem rarely, if ever, changes. And which means if you come up with the right position, you should almost never change it. And
Okay.
but if, too many companies are changing all the time, because I monitor these markets on a yearly basis, annual basis. And, I know what they were positioned last year, and a lot of them change. Some of them, they should, because their position sucks.
So you don't think, sorry, go ahead.
I
So
think,
you don't think AI will change positioning fundamentally speaking?
no, AI is how you do it, what you do. It's
Okay.
not a benefit. People act like it's a benefit. I think, inevitably companies incorporate AI into their messaging, their position. Well, it really should be, AI is how you do it. It's not a benefit.
Okay.
Obviously you want to tell people you're using AI, but again, that would be in the support points, not necessarily in the positioning statement.
Got it. All right.
Now the other aspect of AI is
Okay.
ChatGPT and some of those others, and that's where you got to feed it good information for them to spit out good
Good
results.
results. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all about the prompt, right?
yeah, right, right.
It's the you get what you give.
Yeah,
You give it crappy prompts and poor information, you're gonna get the same crappy information out.
yeah,
You give
exactly.
good prompts, good information, you'll get good results. I agree.
And you usually
100%.
have to edit, and you usually have to do some editing for sure.
Okay. So getting here to the end, let's talk about, you talk about having worked with some pretty big brands in tech, and I want to ask you, what is one timeless messaging principle that you think too many startups today ignore or they're not doing well? Just one.
Well, I think it's failure to focus on the problem that they solve.
Okay, that's actually pretty good. That's the one.
Yeah, I mean, unless the problems change, it's just no reason to change.
To change.
You
All
might,
right.
you could change some words around the key words in your position to adapt and adapt to maybe some changing conditions in the market, but also to adapt to different, buyers in the market, in the company, because that's another key piece of an effective positioning statement, is that it does adapt to multiple buyers if you need it to. And then you check for that in your initial assessment.
Good. So basically, you change your supporting cast, not your main character.
Right, right. And you could change again the context a little bit, but you want to, if get more value from your data is your position, then you need to get that in there.
Good. Well, one last question for the day. If a B2B founder or a market strategist is listening, realizes their messaging might be blurry at best, what is the first step they should take to clarify their positioning starting today?
Well, one is make sure or determine if you're addressing the target buyer's problems. So, and then make sure it's unique.
Got
So
it.
one is, make sure you've addressing the key problem or whatever you identify as the problem that makes it unique. And then again, it's unique. Those kind of two tied together.
One.
Yeah.
Well, Lawson, thank you so much for coming out and spending this last 45 minutes, an hour with us. Truly insightful, and understanding messaging from an expert, I think is super valuable. Thank you for coming out again. We hope to see you soon again.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share my knowledge and understanding of positioning.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on our next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.